Hello, everyone. My name is Professor Khaleed. Welcome back to Journey Through the Colonial Archives. In our first 4 episodes, we followed the paper trail of colonial ideology, from Zurara's 1453 chronicle that made racism popular, to the papal bulls that made it law, to the Berlin Conference that drew it on a map. Today, we examine the machine built to extract the wealth that map contained. And we follow the paper trail to a document that most people have never connected to American slavery, but should have. Now, follow closely, because in London on December 31st, 1600, a royal charter marks the birth of a corporate template that would travel from Asia to Virginia and build the foundation of the American economy using enslaved Africans as collateral. On the last day of the year 1600, Queen Elizabeth I of England signed a royal charter granting a group of London merchants a legal monopoly over all English trade with Asia. The document gave this company something no private enterprise had ever possessed: the right to make war, the right to negotiate treaties, the right to administer justice and govern territory. It fused the authority of a sovereign state with the profit motive of a private corporation and placed the result in the hands of shareholders. The company was called the Governor and Company of Merchants of London Trading into the East Indies. History knows it as the East India Company. Read that charter carefully, and you will find the template for colonial capitalism around the world. Private profit as the primary obligation, government authority placed in service of that profit, military force available when commerce requires it, and legal structures designed to protect the corporation from accountability for the human consequences of its operations. That template would soon make its way to the American colonies. Within a decade of the East India Company Charter, the Crown began issuing similar charters for the colonization of the Americas. The Virginia Company received its first charter in 1606. The Massachusetts Bay Company received its charter in 1629. The Lords Proprietors of Carolina received theirs in 1663. Each charter followed the same architecture as the East India Company document. Each delegated Crown sovereignty over territory to a private corporate entity. Each gave that entity the right to distribute land, legislate, and use force. Each created a legal framework in which private profit and sovereign power were deliberately fused. This was not coincidence. It was policy. The Crown had discovered in the East India Company a mechanism for expanding empire without bearing its full cost. Private investors would fund the venture. Private armies would secure the territory. Private administrators would govern the population, and the Crown would collect its share of the returns. The charter was the instrument, and in Virginia, that instrument would be applied to a problem the East India Company had not yet fully solved: the problem of labor. In 1618, the Virginia Company issued what historians call its Great Charter, a document that would set in motion a chain of legal and economic consequences reaching directly into the racial architecture of contemporary America. The Great Charter formally instituted the headright system, a system that allocated 50 acres of land for each additional person whose passage a planter sponsored. Follow the paper trail, and the logic becomes brutally clear. Land was the source of all wealth in the Virginia colony, for growing tobacco, the colony's primary cash crop. The headright was the fastest path to land, and the fastest path to headrights was importing human labor. Initially, planters imported indentured servants from England, poor Europeans who traded years of labor for passage. But indentured servants eventually earned their freedom. They demanded their own land. They became a restless, armed underclass. In 1676, Bacon's Rebellion, an uprising of landless former servants, nearly destroyed the Virginia colony. The planter elite needed a different solution. That solution was African slaves. In 1672, just 4 years before Bacon's rebellion, King Charles II issued a royal charter to the Royal African Company, granting it a monopoly over the English slave trade to the Americas. The same crown that had chartered the East India Company to extract wealth from Asia now chartered a corporation to supply the American colonies with enslaved African labor. The corporate template had found its ultimate application. In our next episode, we will dive deeper into the headright system itself, showing precisely how the importation of enslaved Africans became a direct path to land ownership, how Virginia law made slavery hereditary in 1662, and how the planter elite used the charter's legislative authority to build an ironclad triangle of land, labor, and law that shaped America's system of slave-based capitalism. The charter authorized it. The headright system incentivized it. The Royal African Company supplied it. The documents are publicly available. Read them. You cannot change what you cannot see. I'm Professor Khaleed. Join me next time as we continue our journey through the colonial archives.